your host, Sophia. And today, my guest is Anna Jerden. She's an estate attorney with extensive experience helping women plan for their futures, protect their assets, and navigate important legal decisions with confidence and clarity. Now, who doesn't need that? I know I do because there's so many things that I have not thought about. Thank you so much for being here today, Anna. Looking so forward to hearing from you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So, okay, I don't even know where to begin. So I guess you know what? I'm gonna go way back. What made you decide to become a lawyer in the first place? And then when you're like, okay, I'm done law school, I passed the bar.
Yeah, yeah.
Why did you say estate and trust law?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. It's actually it goes way back, but I do have this is basically my second career. My first experience in the business world was as a communicator. So I was in corporate communications and public relations for almost 2 decades.
Wow,
Um,
and then you went back to school to be a lawyer?
I did. I did.
Why?
Yeah.
Okay, I just have to give you a round of applause for that. I know law school is not easy.
No, and yes, it's funny because being a professional communicator, basically I was working with lots of companies in different market sectors, um, building brand awareness and communicating, different products and services through product launches for like pharmaceutical companies, consumer technology, pretty much everything in the time that I spent. And that kind of communicating I was always thought that's going to be helpful if I ever do decide to pursue a law career, which was something I wanted to do even before I got into journalism and PR. But, I think the timing, I might have not been ready for it at
Mhm.
that time. So I, started out doing this other thing and I enjoyed almost 2 decades working with so many different people, airlines and, medical researchers and all these things. And at one point, I was kind of just done. So, yeah, I felt like I, had kind of finished my time there. And I decided, maybe now is the time to go back to law school and in my 30s. And so I went back to school and I, decided to try law school. And yeah, it was every bit as hard as I hoped it wouldn't be, but it was. It was a challenge, but so rewarding. And I learned so much about myself. Um, and one thing I learned is that having that other career and all of the skills that I picked up and all the practical experience that I picked up, you have to really divorce yourself of the kind of communication that you do and the different it's all very intuitive when you're dealing with how to persuade somebody to to need a product or to buy something, but law is very different than that. It's based on rules and facts. And so now I do use both worlds, every single day. So, I mean, I couldn't be happier with the choice that I made. And it's like the greatest thing to be able to work with people, everyday people, who just need some education and need some help to improve their lives.
So you were working full time and going to law school?
I was.
I know. Okay, everybody's listening. It's like, so that was her takeaway. But yes, that was out of everything she said, that was one of my big takeaways because I know how hard it is to be working full time and doing a program
Yeah.
like that. And and I also bring it up because there's somebody listening right now who wants to go back to school
Oh, I love that.
full
And
time.
and that's what I was looking for. At the time that I did it, I didn't actually know. I knew people were doing that. People had done it all the time. I was always inspired by stories of, people who have the multiple commas after their names,
Right?
author, writer, cook, all these different things. And I was so inspired by the idea that you don't, it's not just like whatever one decision you made is the only decision you'll ever be able to make.
Yeah.
So, I was really encouraged by, kind of the super women that I had seen. I was listening to a lot of podcasts and I was, talking to people, but nobody I knew personally in my everyday life had done anything like that. So, of course, I was getting a lot of, looks and questions like, are you really going to, where do you think this is going to go? And without knowing, I just took a leap of faith and really it was just blind faith that, I can do this and I'm gonna do this or I'm gonna die trying, So I did and it nearly killed me. Because it's so difficult, you have to just totally immerse yourself and you have to really humble yourself when you're trying to do anything, especially, coming back into full-time study. You're full-time working, but you're also full-time studying, and what does that really look like? And balancing your life with your family and, that what you're used to. So, in a lot of ways, it was like, I mean, starting over, but really starting over with a fresh mindset. And, my husband told me, you know, "This is great, I'm all for it, and you're gonna learn, what you're really capable of." And at the time, I was really, um, nervous that, of course, you wanna succeed, so I was really nervous, "Am I gonna be able to pull this off?" And he just gave me that encouragement that, "You can do whatever you wanna do." So I became emboldened. He said it, so it must be true.
See, and okay, so 2 things from there that I really loved is that you decided to do it and you did it. You didn't even though you didn't see people in your life, you didn't listen to the naysayers because they
Right.
exist and they have the best freaking intentions, but they exist.
Yeah.
And they can throw you off course. So that's one thing that I would love for the listeners to take away that if you have this dream and it is just yelling in your ear to do it, don't listen to the naysayers. Don't let them
Yeah.
throw you off track. And then the other thing you said that I think is so important, because I know a lot of my audience are, single professional women over 40, but I know there are people who have significant others as well.
Mhm.
And the important takeaway that I got from this is that it is so important to have a significant other, spouse, partner, whatever title I have, to be supportive and to whether or not they believe in the dream, they believe in you. And they believe in you to the point where they can hold that for you until you can believe it for yourself. Now, I know I do a lot of believing for my clients until they can believe for themselves, but it's really important that if you have somebody in your life that they can do that for you too. Because I'm sure, like you said, well, he said it, so it must be true. And we have a lot of internal authority, but sometimes when it comes from somebody who loves us, then it's like, well, they know me, they love me, and they said it, so it must be true. And granted, the opposite is also true because they can see
Sure.
something that is not uplifting and you believe it because they
Right.
so I guess where I'm going with this is it's important to have a
You
support
do.
person.
You really do.
Because
It
if they're not
takes a
supportive, it
village.
can really take you down as well. Same way a supportive person who's filled you up. Some person who is not supportive can tear you down. So maybe that's the message to look at who's in your life.
It's
Yep.
true, and actually, as a part being a trust attorney, I meet a lot of families, single people, married people, divorced people, people who are widowed, large families, small families, pretty much everything. My youngest client's 18, my oldest client's 95. And, you know, that is, I think, the probably one of the most, if not the most rewarding thing to be able to interact with people and, like, what they're concerned about, and a lot of times, we just kind of hold what we don't know, and we just, kind of put our head in the sand, and we're not thinking about how to make, how to basically find what the advantages are that are out there. And so part of this work that's so rewarding is you really do, you get a partner who's in your corner. And, if you've been worried about certain family members that, you don't get along with, or if there's some relationship dynamic that's going on, or some complex, business thing, or if it's a tax issue you're worried about, it's really s it's basically about people. Estate planning is about people, and what I find that, really dovetails with what we're talking about here is that that's what the clients always tell me, that they're really appreciative of the work that we do together because it makes them feel a little bit stronger about their concerns. It, puts a lot of their worries to rest, things that people have been worried about for years and years. Maybe it's an aging parent, or, if it's, a potential legal issue down the line that they just haven't been able to wrap their head around. And so, being kind of like that person that is willing to talk through a lot of this stuff, it's, these things that, no concern is, too small. People are worried about certain things that don't necessarily have kind of um, you know, a, um, a legal significance in a way that could harm them, but it's something that's intrinsically valuable to them.
Mm.
So, it's a huge blessing to be allowed into people's lives in this way and to get to talk through, some of the things that they worry about and help them through it.
So let's go to basics here. What is a trust? And what
Yeah.
is the benefit of having a trust? Because I think a lot of people probably think, well, I'm not really wealthy and only wealthy people have trusts and all the things.
Yes.
So can we start
Yeah.
really basic?
Um, really basic. So let's go back a little bit and just say estate plan is more of a general term, but an estate plan is essentially something, it's a set of arrangements that you make, and it may involve creating a trust, setting up a trust that has, legal validity. It may involve, a will, maybe a trust is not feasible based on a certain set of facts and circumstances with every family. But basically, it's a set of legal arrangements. So specifically, a trust is it's a legal relationship that you enter into as a person who's making the trust. So we'll call them the trust maker, and it is, a set of legal arrangements where it's essentially a contract. And you get to choose someone to basically step into your shoes and handle your affairs, whether that's, business or, certain healthcare matters. They might be receiving property that they're entrusted to manage. That's the person is called the trustee. And most of the time, trust makers are also their own trustee. So it's not a separate, doesn't have to be a separate legal entity. That is like, when you get down to more complex trust planning, that might be the case. But most people just have a revocable living trust, and it is a legal arrangement. And basically that person takes and manages property on behalf of a beneficiary or several beneficiaries. So what that looks like is kind of like, I sort of equate it to being like a house. So setting up a trust is like setting up, building a house, and the house is empty until you furnish it. So furnishing it is like moving your home into it, moving, the moving certain assets into this legal framework. So it has a lot of benefits, and a lot of people think, well, in general, like you said, I'm too young for an estate plan. I don't have enough money. Why do I need an estate plan or a trust or a will or any of these planning devices? And, the reality is that everyone needs that actually, because, if you have a bank account, or if you own any property, if you're a business owner, if you have children, a spouse, some type of planning is appropriate. And I kind of, the way I describe it with clients is, if something were to happen to you today, What would your tomorrow look like? Do you have
I'm dead.
yeah, do you have 20 well, I mean, for your family, for the people that are here that have to now react,
Right. No, I
to this.
understand. I understand what you're saying because, um, yeah, I get it because my dad passed and there are so many things and moving parts. I mean, he did a lot of great things that, made things easy, but then there were other things that weren't done that made
Sure.
it harder. So, okay, let's use me as an example.
Okay.
If I wanted to create a trust, I can put my home in the trust. Let's say I buy another home, I can put that home in the trust. Uh,
Mhm.
even though I have certain people on my bank accounts as beneficiaries, I can still name the bank accounts in the trust with the people who I already have on them. Yes?
Yes, there's a lot of things you can do with the trust. It's very flexible, and that's why it's, so popular. The other thing I think that's important for people to understand is that a trust is the only thing that's going to keep you out of probate court. So,
I'm so
what
glad
is
you brought that up.
what is probate court? It's one of those things that nobody, unless you've been through it, you don't understand what it is. It sounds like, oh, that will never apply to me. Um, that's something where you see, celebrities, they're arguing over, large estates, and it only applies to them. But actually, probate court applies to everyone who doesn't have essentially a trust. And in some cases, even if you have a trust, and in the setup, some of the properties, like, for example, you mentioned, you might have a home, you might have a second property, a rental property, or you might have commercial real estate or some type of asset that was never moved into the trust. You still might have to go through probate. But what a trust will do is it will, um, at least as a default, will keep your estate out of probate court. And probate is essentially just, since we're in California, it's California's legal process of transferring property from one person who has died to another person. But it's important to note that probate court doesn't only deal with death, it also deals with incapacity.
Mm.
So incapacity can happen. I mean, at I'm not sure what the dementia statistics are, but, dementia is another reason why a lot of people are kind of motivated to start thinking about estate planning. Because if at some point you lose your mental, capacity, you would also lose what we call testamentary capacity, and that is to make a will or to make a trust or even to execute a power of attorney document for handling financial matters,
Right.
and healthcare decision making as well. So, estate planning is not just focused on death. Um, it's also importantly and maybe even more emergently focused on, injury or illness. And that can happen to anyone, regardless of your age or, your level of wealth, if you will. So um, it's one of the things that I'm always kind of exploring with clients is how the different types of trust plan or estate planning in general, how it's really multifaceted in a lot of ways. It isn't just focused on death, but sometimes it helps you have if you have a family dynamic that's not too great. There's a lot of things that you can accomplish through estate planning that will help to kind of organize not just the things in your life, but the people in your life as well.
And I think that that's such a great idea. And and it needs to move from idea to action because I think so many of us we hear things, it's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then another day passes and then weeks and months pass
Yeah.
and we don't know what's going to happen
Right.
because again, I think you brought up some really good points that estate planning isn't just about death. And because death can be such a taboo and triggering conversation, people don't want to think about it. But it's also about life, and
It's absolutely true.
we need to look at how we're living and what what could happen. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody fall down the rabbit hole of worst case scenario, but you can also look at your family and look at some of the things that you've been through or you know somebody who's been through something. So,
Absolutely.
uh, and because of something that I've been through, I need to ask, so because I live in California and let's say I do this all in California and then I move to another country, is it still valid?
Well, it's gonna be valid if you move anywhere in the United States. It's still gonna be valid, but, as it applies to other countries, what we always encourage people to do as estate planners is, if you created an instrument in California, you're gonna be covered in all 50 states, but, there's state and federal. So, the state that you move to or the jurisdiction outside of the country that you move to, they're going to have their own rules the same way that California has its rules.
Mhm.
So it's always a good idea if you have a plan already in place and certain things in your life change, whether you change your domicile, you're now living in a new state or a new country, that stop and take a look at what you need to do to localize your plan because there might be certain things, in the local rules and laws that, might not apply the same way to either a relationship that you have or an asset that you hold. So, tax is another issue, is another benefit aside from probate avoidance. And tax planning is something that really can't be done in a whole lot of other ways than, to be doing it during an estate planning process. But that's another thing that, obviously that local jurisdiction is going to apply, different, maybe state tax rules. But at least in the United States, the federal tax law is obviously applicable statewide or countrywide.
Okay. And well, so I'll just tell a little bit of my story right now. So my dad passed and left property in another country.
Okay.
And I'm on the deed for the property. So I own I own it, but I'm wondering, like, let's say I have had a trust or have a trust, sorry. So you talked about it and it happened to me. Would that property, because it is in another country, could I put that in my trust because it's mine?
Yeah, absolutely. And you should. If sometimes we acquire your estate is basically anything that you own and owe at death. So, your estate is all these things that you've acquired throughout your life, and that includes things that you acquire through inheritance. So, whether that's in the jurisdiction where you live or a jurisdiction abroad, that will still be, your property, assuming, of course, that you've actually received it legally. And then once you have, you can take steps to move that property into your, if you have a trust already, or if it's, sometimes people will acquire property through an inheritance. And that's what makes them, not just experiencing the death of a loved one, but also, okay, well, now I've received this property. What should I do with it? So it kind of brings these needs to light.
Mhm.
And as a motivator, it's a unfortunately, it usually starts with somebody's death, but it is a great motivator to be thinking about, what would it be like for me if the people around me and in my life had to be in my shoes and see, what they would need to do if, they lost me. So, absolutely, if you have property that you've received through an inheritance, that's a good time to be taking a look at, moving it into maybe a trust instrument or at least, doing some kind of estate planning around it.
And I don't know if you can answer this question, maybe you can answer it broadly, because yes, people were starting to talk about me. Uh, so
Well, I should also say that nothing that we talk about here is legal advice, but I love talking about the subject, so that's just a little disclaimer.
so if there are other countries involved, and so let's say I put that in the trust, but other countries, like you said, they have different rules and
Mhm.
different regulations and whatever. Do you is it okay, because I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but so to answer generally, let me pick my words well. Is it a good idea, possibly, to mirror the trust that you have in the United States in the other country, let's say you're gonna reside there, in the other country, so that whatever you do, it accommodates their laws as well.
You nailed it, yes. So, if you have property in another, country and you have, a domestic trust, let's say, in the state in which you live in California, um, whatever you have in another country, you should definitely do planning for that as well. So because, if it's real property, so if it's real estate,
Mm.
um, interest of some sort, then there's nothing stopping you. And I do encourage people if you have inherited property abroad that you find a local attorney and, have a conversation about how to get that property, properly protected for your benefit and for the benefit of your beneficiaries.
These are all things that I have to be going through in a way. Navigating another country's laws
Yep,
that don't mirror the laws of the land that you live in
exactly.
can be very frustrating, and
And it
you don't know
is.
what you don't know. So, trying just finding out stuff on the back end. So you try to do something and then you hit a wall because it's like, "Well, no, we need this and this and this." It's like, "But I just need
Right.
to do this." So just to be transparent about
Yeah.
what's happening. My dad left a will in Canada, right?
Okay.
Because that's where he lived, and everything went smoothly. But in the other country, we, went to the bank like we did at home. 'Cause I'm Canadian, so yes, I said at home, but I do live in California, and I'm here legally, guys.
Just so you know.
Just so you know. Um, and and so we go to the bank there thinking it's gonna be easy peasy like it was at home,
Sure.
and we give 'em the death certificate and all the things, and like, "No, here's what we need. We need you to do, oh, I guess maybe it's their equivalent of probate, that we need you to do a will search." It's like, "Well, what are we searching for? We already know there's no will." It's like, "Yeah, but you have to do it." And it's like, "But"
Right.
so now I have to pay a lawyer to go search for something that doesn't exist because we already know there's no will, so anyway.
Yeah, and
And
and the
it's
thing.
still on my heart, and it's still kinda ticking me off because I think that's
Oh,
the
sure.
stupidest thing.
And I'm glad you're saying that because that's what I'm trying to help people avoid. Is, the circumstances are gonna change depending on, what you're actually dealing with and where you're dealing with it. So, but that's the idea is that imagine if you had, a whole alphabet of things, individual things like this thing that you're dealing with, and each one of those things amounts to a huge mountain of things. And, you know, getting the planning in place is something that you can do to avoid all of that. Going back to the really briefly to, your very first question, I think I heard the question there somewhere, and if not, then I'll give it to the information anyway. But, why this? Why trust in estates? Because I too had and this is the how it affects every person, it's really every person's situation, and it's appropriate for everyone, and this is one of the reasons why, is that I too had a family member who experienced a medical event that they never recovered from. And it was, so catastrophic that it really changed all of our lives. And so at the time, I we got to see firsthand, look at all the things that we have to do. Look at all of the things that now kind of fall on us.
Mhm.
And in that situation, the person was the family member didn't pass away, but it speaks to the issue of incapacity, the life part of planning. And so without that, we got to see, front and center all of the difficulties that people really face. And it is just a whole stack of things. And so, that's kind of, that's what made me very interested in I realized, you don't have to go through this. We didn't have to go through it. And I just kept thinking to myself, well, if they just And then it gets to a point where, I'm sure they thought about it, but they hadn't turned idea into action.
Yes.
And at the time, you know, I was really kind of empowered by that idea that, people should know. People should know all of the everyday practical things. The thinking that you're not old enough or not rich enough. I mean, that is just on the surface. Whether or not you have, $10 in an account or $1 million in an account, if you passed away, it will have to be dealt with one way or the other.
Right.
And so getting the planning in place and, having it's not meant to scare people, but I do think that people do find the subject matter, so heavy that it's hard for them to really wrap their head around it. And the procrastination, you can get to the point where you have to make arrangements, but you just haven't found the time.
Yeah.
And so, one thing I try to offer is that, let's work together. Let's just make it easy for you. And, it doesn't have to be that difficult. You don't have to keep worrying. Especially now, I think a lot of people are kind of worried about all sorts of things, and laws are changing very rapidly in front of us, and the world is changing around us, and this is something you do have control over. You can still take control and maintain, a sense of order through some of these really critical life events.
Yeah. I think it's just important. It's important to think about it, but like you said, you have to take action on it. And I'm speaking to myself as well as everybody else because I know that there are things that I do need to take action on. But then at the same time, you also want to do it with somebody who is knowledgeable, who who somebody who you trust. And I think that could be the thing that's holding people back sometimes. It's like, well, I don't know anybody.
Right. Where do I start? Because I don't even know what I don't
I don't
know.
know what I don't know. I don't know a lawyer who could do this. Well, now you guys do. And we'll get you her information. But I mean that is a big concern because
Yeah.
many lawyers charge buku bucks per hour to do a thing, and then you find out they didn't do the thing right, or that wasn't their area of expertise, but they said they could do it, and then something happens and you realize it's not right. And so, so many things
Yeah.
that are there to, I guess, that you worry about before you take the action, because you know you need to take the action, but you're thinking about all these different things, and then you've heard all these horror stories from all these different people, and then you get analysis paralysis because it's like, I don't know.
It's overwhelming.
I don't know what to do. I don't know who to go to, and yes, I am not
That's
a
exactly
wealthy
right.
person, and so I don't have a ton of money to pay a lawyer to do these things, and so I think those are the kind of things that hold people back.
Right. And, the overwhelm is a great excuse, a great kind of reasoning to say, "Well, I'll deal with it on another day." Or, "Maybe I'll save up for it." But, one of the things we give free consultation. So, anybody can call me up and just have a conversation, and we don't charge for that. And I think, a lot of, estate planners and estate planning attorneys are really aware of that. It's not legal advice, but it's, "Hi, I'm so and so, and let's have an initial conversation about, what worries you, what you'd like to ultimately, what's your kind of your long game." And it just helps to at least get your foot in the door and start having that conversation. One of the things I really enjoy is one thing that we do a little differently, as I've heard just kind of listening and paying attention around me, is that, we don't limit the amount of phone calls. We don't limit your access. There are other ways to do it, for sure, but, if you're talking to a lawyer, then you've got some problem you need to solve. So I, really like to get to know my clients, and they know they can call or text anytime. They know they can email me at any time. And there's really no question that's either too repetitive because I realize that, this subject matter is, you can't put them through law school with you. But what you can do is try and break it down in a really digestible way.
Right.
People are worried, for example, with power of attorney. Gosh, it sounds so formal, doesn't it? It sounds so foreboding. What does that mean? Is that like signing away your whole life? And it's not. It's not that at all. It's the power of attorney actually is one of the most instrumental devices that you can have in case of all sorts of circumstances.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times we see things with clients where there will be some issue that, well, if they had a power of attorney in place, this is something that could have been completely changed. Like, the outcome would have been so different, so much better, so less,
Oh,
restrictive.
what's an example of that?
A good example would be a husband and wife, let's say,
Mhm,
have a situation maybe where they're caring for an aging parent.
mhm,
And the aging parent now kind of, is sort of slipping into a situation where their dementia is, um, you know, affecting their mental capacity.
mhm.
And so, the adult children can use a power of attorney, instrument, a power of attorney to actually help their parent deal with things like, the ownership of property. What if they end up, having to go into long-term care? And there is a rental property, not the house that they're currently living in, or the house that they're living in, and they no longer can care for themselves. But they have this property, and they say, "Well, I want you to sell it for me." Or I want to be able to sell it. And you can take the proceeds of that sale and convert it into assets that can be used towards long-term care.
Mm.
Um, and so that's, it's those kinds of things. Anytime you have a bank account, if you've ever dealt with a situation like this before, and I think a lot of us have at least some experiences, when you call up the bank, if you're not that person, they won't talk to you.
Right.
And in some cases, if you are that person and the account is frozen as a result of fraud or as a result of some, kind of unique situation, somebody needs to be able to access that has the legal authority to help you out in a bind. But what it is not is a blank check and the right to just, take those assets and, use it for your own benefit. That's absolutely prohibited. But a lot of people think, oh, well, if I give a power of attorney to so and so, they're just going to make off like a bandit. And,
And I
you
think
know,
that's a big concern for a lot of people.
yeah,
It's like, well, what if they do this or what if they do that or what if they say I'm crazy and I'm not? And
right.
well, they're trying to make me crazy so they can take
Yeah.
me out.
Well, that's why it's so important to work with an attorney who can help you through those kind of details because we do address a lot of those things. We address the details, um, very specifically. Whereas there's all kinds of things that you find online and you think it has legal weight, but most of the time those kind of things can really get you in a lot of hot water and create, you think you're helping yourself by, I'll just do this, or I'll just, copy, this and those things are always really troublesome. And we do a lot of fixes. As an estate planning lawyer, I see a lot of people come to me and they say, "Well, we had this thing," and then we'll take a look at it, and it will be pretty apparent that we'll need to help them remedy, the damage. So
Fix what they broke without knowing that they broke something.
yeah, get it right the first time is kind of how we try to encourage people.
So I happen like a friend of mine, her stepdad just passed, and now I'm not remembering the terminology, but on on his bank account, he had his wife as the beneficiary, but I think he had something else on the bank account, and again, it's escaping me right now, but almost like in transfer or something like that, so that when he passed, she would be able to get the money even without a will or without having to go through probate. Do you know what I'm talking about? Is it
Yeah,
no.
there's different substitute this I'm not, this might not be what you're talking about, but it's along the lines of is there's different ways that you can hold an account, that you might have, that account might transfer through, other means.
Mhm.
A lot of times banks have their own process. Sometimes they have their own process that is, um, kinda difficult to work with, and but, passing through a will or passing through a trust or passing automatically by operation of law in some other way is, there's lots of different ways that assets can transfer, but it really depends on kind of how that account is held, whether they're joint owners, whether there's a spousal situation, whether there's like a pay on death, type of transfer. There's all
Yeah,
sorts of
that's what it was, pay and
different.
yes.
Okay,
I knew it would come out. But I think and the reason I wanted to bring that up too is because, again, idea to action, if we're not taking action all the way. It's like if you're running a 5K, this could be like the water break. If you put pay on death on your bank account until you can get to the finish line and do your estate planning.
Yeah, we go into all those different topics when we go through the process with the client. We take them from the beginning where we're getting to know you, tell me about your life, give me some basic information, and then we'll recommend, a set of actions that help to accomplish those objectives. And so throughout the process, we're collaborating with clients, we're listening to their concerns. They can come and ask questions, and so, together we come up with that plan, and those are some of the things that we talk about during the sort of the finishing stages of the creation of an estate plan. Is that it's comprehensive. So we deal with health, your family's tax issues. If there's anything there that needs to be addressed. Passing property between spouses, between parents and children. Um, Property, to minor children. We deal with all of that. We deal with funding issues. Obviously, you're going to like the example of the building of the house. We help you build that house, but we can also help you furnish it, and by moving assets into it. And so that all comes as a result of that sort of finishing stage, which is the funding of the trust or the depending on the type of trust, but some trusts aren't funded until there's a death, and then some are funded, initially with some property, but it is like a vessel that will hold whatever you want to, avoid probate, or if it's, a tax concern, we address a lot of tax issues when it comes to trust planning, especially in California. It used to be we won't get into the weeds here, but with Proposition 19, so many, it used to be that you owned a home, a family home, and you passed it to your children, and
Mhm.
they just receive it and they can live in it and sell it, and it's kind of not controversial. But now, with our property tax laws that have changed in the last couple of years, especially through Proposition 19, one of the defining features of prior proposition that it replaced, which was Prop 58, meant that you could pass property, whether it was your primary residence, the family home,
Mhm.
or the vacation home, or if you had several vacation homes, you could pass it to your children and it wouldn't be reassessed for property tax. But now it will be reassessed, and there's certain rules that apply here in California that you could still pass it to your children and there'll be kind of an offset. But it isn't just, what it was, which is that you could leave property to your children and receive that stepped up tax basis where you would avoid that, you know, um, that property tax reassessment because obviously property tax isn't a big issue for Californians. And we have planning devices that we do as lawyers that can, help mitigate some of those tax liabilities. Um, so, that's why I always encourage people, if you're curious, you just want to have a conversation, you can pick up the phone and do that, with any number of attorneys that, either myself or somebody in your local area that will just have a discovery call with you just to kind of talk about what you're looking to accomplish. And most of them will well, I don't wanna say most of them. Many will do it for free.
Yeah. Well, and I think that to that's the key to a lot of things. But I think for this, taking away the fear of having a conversation with somebody that's gonna be billed in 15-minute increments is scary.
Yeah,
You know,
I know.
like, what if I have another question? "Oh, it's been 21 minutes, gotta go." You know?
Yeah.
So, I think what you're doing, and I really appreciate that, is just taking that fear away. That, yes, I can actually get information and not have to worry about, "Oh, the money I woulda put in my trust, I just spent it." It's
Right.
getting
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah. Yeah, we like to actually give you a chance to get started, and that's the idea is that let's just talk about it. Let's first have a conversation about it. Now, some people are, they've been around the block and they've experienced it already, but many of our clients have never created a trust or created any kind of an estate plan. We talk
Mhm,
about, we when you come in, we assume you don't know anything about it, and we, try and translate it in a way that that's easy to grasp. And because, I'm just like everybody else. I have family and, as a business owner and, all these things that I'm also thinking about. And as a woman, there are, one of the emergent things, and this, we can save this for another day as well. But, the need for women are in a unique position because you're essentially in a position where you have to plan more than once. As usually the decision maker for your whole entire family, especially in case where you have children, you would plan if you are married, you would plan with your spouse, or with your partner. And then historically, and we know, statistically that men die earlier than women,
mhm.
so now you've survived, but you have to now plan again for the rest of your life and for your children. So women are largely responsible. We have the opportunity and the obligation to ensure that that wealth, or whatever those assets are, transfer again. And, so it's especially important. I encourage women to really take advantage of the resources that are available and have that conversation. Find somebody that you click with and, just have a candid conversation, very much like we're having today.
Perfect. So if people wanna make that phone call or wanna get in contact with you and you don't want your phone ringing off the hook, how can we reach you?
I mean, in a number of ways, but I don't mind if the phone rings off the hook. They can visit our website at relatelaw.com, RELATE law.com. We have a nice little button right there at the top. If they want to make an appointment, they can make an appointment right on our website for a consultation. Or they can give us a call at area code 818-620-7200. And we'd love to hear from you. We love to hear from people, and I love meeting new people, and, they call and they say, "I'm worried about my mother, I'm worried about my kids, or I'm, worried about what should I do about my business, or I'm a professional, can I leave it to somebody?" So it's great. I love hearing from people, and that's the best part of this job is just connecting with real everyday people.
Perfect. Okay, guys, so we have to move from idea to action. And now we know who we can call. And okay, so you may not be in California and you're listening to this. Doesn't mean you can't call and maybe just get some general information so that you're more informed when you go and find somebody locally. Just a thought.
We also have a lot of, we try and educate people through, through our website. And so we have lots of blog articles that deal with all sorts of different things. So there's a lot of information on there that, anybody can go on and take a look, and maybe they might find a situation that suits them a little bit, and that will help them to find somebody locally to, if they're in a different state locally, to, address some of those concerns.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thanks for giving us a little bit of education on estate planning and what it could look like. And, just
Thank you.
thank you. All right.
Thanks so much, Sophia.
You're welcome.